don't have to tell you guys this, but up until about maybe 4 days ago, nobody really liked Vice President Kamala Harris. And there's been rumblings for years that her own staff didn't really like working for Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, that's all going to be swept under the rug now because the Democrats have to feign excitement and enthusiasm about their candidate, after they staged the insurrection on their former candidate, of course. But there's a lot more to dig into here when it comes to Kamala Harris. Now, her record, which isn't noteworthy in any way, shape, or form, is going to be scrutinized. We also have to talk about Vice President Kamala Harris, the person. What does she like to work for? What are the numbers? Just the cold, hard numbers tell us about her current boss, about the Democrat Party and their turnover issue. Well, lucky for us, we have Open the Book CEO and founder Adam Andrzejewski, who always gives us the facts and the figures that we need. And he's got some startling analysis about Vice President Kamala Harris and her 92% staff turnover rate during her first 3 years. It hasn't gotten better since, by the way. Adam, what do we need to know about what it's like to work for Vice President Kamala Harris?
Well, by all indications, whether it's the national media like The Atlantic saying that it's top to bottom dysfunction to be on her staff, or just the cold hard facts that our auditors at openthebooks.com just uncovered, Kamala Harris is a bad boss. It's tough to work for her. So we identified 47 initial staffers when she took power back in 2021. There's only 4 of those people that are still working for her on her staff. About 9 months ago, The Atlantic, they did a deep dive and they took a look at the executive positions that had left just in her first 18 months. She lost her chief of staff, her national security advisor, her domestic security advisor, her communications director, and many, many others. And as you mentioned, it's not getting better. It's actually getting worse. We found that in the trailing 12-month period, she lost half her staff. 24 people quit on her on a staff of 50.
Which is wild because I think that those of us that have been reading the tea leaves knew that there was a good chance that Joe Biden was going to drop out of the presidential race for 2024. So the fact that these staffers would leave, even knowing that they could possibly be promoted into a position to maybe be serving the president of the United States, the fact that she's got that turnover rate, it says something there. There's a story to be told. Now we know that now that she's the presumptive nominee for the Democrat Party, a lot of this is going to be buried. Everyone's going to have a rosy picture of her. She's going to be historic. She's going to be phenomenal. She's going to be a good time girl. Yeah, but the numbers tell us a completely different story on that. But also I want to dig into her current boss, at least for the moment, Joe Biden. I mean, there's been a lot of rumblings and a lot of articles written about how his staff doesn't necessarily like to work with him either, that he has outbursts, that he gets pretty angry. What can you tell us about his turnover rate, or maybe what the numbers tell us about his staff?
So Joe Biden's turnover rate was extraordinary. It was 77% since his first year. So he turned over better than 3 out of every 4 of his initial hires. And Tommy, he's got a bloated White House payroll. We went back 50 years, all the way back to Richard Nixon in 1971. And over the 50-year period, none of the presidents had a White House headcount on their payroll north of 500. Joe Biden has 565 staffers. That's 152 more than what Trump had at the same point in his 4th year of his presidency. For crying out loud, it's 100 more than what Barack Obama had at the same point. So Joe Biden, he's got a bloated White House staff, and Jill Biden actually has a staff of 24. She's got a national security advisor. She's got a senior advisor on the economy, on healthcare, a senior advisor on the workforce, which calls into question, that question that everyone's been asking lately: who's actually running the country?
Yeah, I'd also like to point out, as we've seen with the Secret Service director having to resign and not be fired, when you have these turnover rates within the Biden administration, whether it's Kamala or whether it's Joe's staff, I think that also tells an interesting story because it's really hard to get fired from that administration. They don't really fire people. They quit. They quit or they resign or they're forced to resign. So the fact that these people are just quitting on their own, they're not being fired, that tells me that maybe working in that administration might not be the most pleasant place to work. So there's a big story to be told there. And while I brought it up, talking about the Secret Service, you and I chat all the time about government waste. That's what Open the Books does, is you look into government waste. And there was a lot of discussion ahead of this Secret Service hearing, and then, of course, the debacle of the assassination attempt that's still fresh in our mind about government waste. And there's been a lot of discussion about how the Secret Service has a $3.1 billion budget. They say that they need more. They need more staff. They can't really get a lot of staff. They can't hire people. It's been rated as one of the worst places to work within the federal government. When you look at some of these numbers, what does that tell you about some of these administrations or administrations within administrations? And what the numbers and the payrolls and the turnover rate tell you about all that?
So I think, for instance, Joe Biden's White House staff being bloated, the presidential payroll has always been a leading indicator, Tommy, of whether, a president's going to do more with less or try to do more with more. And Joe Biden's trying to do more with more. They've added at least 40,000 more bureaucrats in the 123 federal executive agencies versus Donald Trump. So he's spiking the federal payroll while he spiked his own White House payroll. And meanwhile, his 20 largest federal agencies just admitted over the course of the last 4 years to improper and mistaken payments of $1 trillion. Now, 3 of those years are during Biden's years. One of them's during Trump, but it's $1 trillion worth of mistakes. The wrong person paid in the wrong amount or under the wrong set of rules. Tommy, your neighborhood grocery store has better in-house financial accounting controls than Joe Biden's federal agencies.
That's pretty wild that you can lose count of that much money. I mean, the COVID fraud, that's a whole separate issue, but geez, where did all the COVID money go? I think that there's a lot of fraud and abuse there. You and I have talked about that before. Also, overpayments to Ukraine. I don't think people are paying enough attention to that. I think people, with everything going on right now, people only seem to care about this horse race between Donald Trump and whoever. I mean, I guess Kamala, I don't know. But there's still improper payments that are being made to Ukraine, and there's not a whole lot of accountability there. I know that you guys have been keeping up on that, following up on that, so the American people know as a foreign policy perspective. But what can you tell us about some of the work that you guys have done to keep tabs on this Ukraine funding?
So we're going to come out with a report on the Pentagon on Ukraine funding before the end of the year. So stay tuned. It's going to be absolutely extraordinary. But it goes back to a simple problem: transparency. And it's Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution. And it says that we're supposed to be able to see and track the payments of the federal government. I want to take this back to Vice President Kamala Harris, because her payroll turnover, that's the information she never wanted you, Tommy, or the American people to know about. We filed a federal Freedom of Information Act request for her payroll. She rejected it. She says that her office of vice president, a heartbeat away from the presidency, is not subject to the Freedom of Information Sunshine laws. We had to get her payroll from the United States Senate. And so this tells you everything you need to know about Kamala Harris and how she views the American people trying to hold her accountable.
So, Adam, why does she not want that information about her payroll out there? Is it because it would expose the high turnover rate?
Yeah, I think, as vice president, she's leaning on a 1994 Clinton era staff memo out of the Department of Justice that says that the office of vice president's not subject to FOIA. We vehemently disagree. We're going to sue on it here shortly. We believe she is subject to FOIA. She is the least transparent elected official, as far as we could tell, in the entire country. I know of no other elected official anywhere that doesn't disclose their payrolls and their vendor spending, because we capture all of that at openthebooks.com. We filed 55,000 FOIAs last year. Now, the Congress isn't subject to FOIA law either, but they disclose their payrolls and they disclose their vendor spending, and we capture that. Only the vice president, Kamala Harris, is not showing the American people where she is spending our money.
So when you say vendor spending, what does that include?
That's the checkbook spending. So that would be for a federal agency, or for Congress, or for a member of Congress. It's the line by line checkbook payments on how they spend our taxpayer money. For a member of Congress, it would be, for franking and their mail privileges and how much they pay their staff, and for paper, pencils, and furniture, and for anything that they spend taxpayer money on. She refuses to show us any of that.
Wow. That's really odd. I mean, I don't expect much different, but I just don't know what she would have to hide. I haven't seen her doing a whole lot in the last 3.5 years, so I'm not really sure what she's spending money on. I see her getting ice cream, going to yarn stores, ribbon cuttings. I see her on with Drew Barrymore, but I don't really know what she's done. And apparently, she doesn't want us to know either. So there's that part of it. There's another part of Vice President Kamala Harris's role that we're all a little confused on, and that's her as border czar. I know that you guys have dug in a lot to the numbers here, but she's supposed to oversee all of this. We're spending a lot of money on this mass invasion, and there might not be enough discussion on the fact that she's supposed to oversee it, but also this should be an election issue. I think it's being overshadowed by a lot of other election issues, like, I don't know who the damn candidate is. But when you look into this border spending and this mass invasion spending, what do the American people need to know about some of the waste, fraud, and abuse there?
So Kamala Harris was in charge of the border. Joe Biden said so. And what do we have? We have the New York Times doing an expose. There's at least 75,000 unaccompanied minors that have come across the open southern border that the administration cannot find in this country. This is a massive child trafficking operation. And you would think that if you, Kamala Harris, were in charge of the border, you would straighten that out. And she's done absolutely nothing on this absolutely catastrophic story and dereliction of border security.
I am old enough to remember when they shrieked about Donald Trump losing kids or separating but they've lost all these kids. We don't know where they are. We know we're paying for them in some way, shape, or form. We're paying for something. We're paying cartel and criminal organizations as well to traffic them, and then we lose track of them. They also decided to end the DNA testing at the border, which would have lessened some of these problems, maybe keep people from coming in with children that are not their own. So there's a whole other landscape here that we haven't even dug into yet, but there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. A lot of people are talking about Kamala Harris being the nominee for the Democrat side. She's the presumptive nominee at this point. It would be shocking at this point if they were to change course, though I don't put it past them. But, a lot of people are talking about DEI and the fact that Joe Biden nominated Kamala Harris as his vice president and running mate for maybe some DEI purposes. He wanted a woman of color. But, there's a lot of DEI spending within the federal government that we are spending. When I say within the federal government, I mean we, the taxpayer. I don't expect that to end under a Harris administration. How much are we wasting on those initiatives?
Well, we're going to do an oversight report on this as well, Tommy. You're hitting on all the big issues. But here's what we uncovered last week. We issued a report called Schools for Radicals, built on the title of Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals. And the Schools for Radicals are actually run by the Pentagon. They run K through 12 public schools for 66,000 children of our military men and women who serve. And what we found was they've embedded DEI into every facet of the academy across the entire complex. Now, a year ago, with great fanfare, and we thought the Pentagon saw it our way, this was a big win for our team at openthebooks.com. The Pentagon eliminated their first ever office of diversity, equity, and inclusion within their K through 12 public schools. But what they did is they secretly hid it inside of an organization driving it into every facet, a secret steering committee on DEI. When we filed a request to see who's on it, what the impacts are, what the agenda is, all the Freedom of Information Act requests came back redacted and blanked out. Pages and pages and pages. When we filed an appeal, it's been 18 months. We still don't even have an answer. And so this is what's going on at the Pentagon today.
I mean, that's astounding that we're paying for all of this and they don't want us to know. You know what? If they were so proud of their initiatives, that they really thought that they were doing something to advance education in a patriotic way that we could all be proud of, then they wouldn't be working so hard to keep it from us, redacting it, making it so difficult for you at Open the Books to get the answers. And, to kind of put a ribbon on all of this, I know you guys do such hard work. You put in these requests, you hunt down all this information, you track these numbers, which cannot be easy to track government accounting, for goodness sakes, especially when they stonewall you at every turn. But when you guys are working on these investigations, of which you have many, what is the most difficult part of what you guys have to do to get us this information?
Well, right now at the federal level, there's a war on transparency. And I want to give you a specific example on this, Tommy. So Within the 123 federal executive agencies, now under Biden, for the first time in modern presidential history, there's 1.5 million federal bureaucrats, but 380,000 names are redacted, blanked out. And I want to put that in comparison to the last year of the Obama administration. There was only 2,600 names blacked out. Today, there's 380,000. So they're just hiding basic payroll information, and it never gets any better, as you start to dig into their numbers. So our main problem is just to get the information up front. If we get it, we can give them oversight, and we sue them. Judicial Watch is our legal partner. We sue them when we don't get it.
So you're telling me there's over 300,000 people that are working for the federal government on the taxpayer dime that we don't know who they are?
Yes, and it's even worse, as it normally is in this circumstance. 250,000 of their work locations are also redacted. So, Tommy, think about this. It's a Where's Waldo of a federal bureaucrat. We don't know who's working, where they're at, and I'll submit to you, we don't even know what they're doing. So there needs to be a lot of reform amongst the administrative state.
No kidding. Is there any reason why somebody's name would be blacked out? I'm sure that there are individuals that have some kind of a security clearance in which their name would need to be protected for those reasons, but hundreds of thousands of people, that can't be the case for all those people. I know that you can't make a definitive statement as to who they are or why they would be covered up, but what's your best guess as to why hundreds of thousands would be redacted in that way?
So we have to go back to 2016. In 2016, our auditors at openthebooks.com, we mapped the swamp that Donald Trump inherited from Barack Obama. And we put every single bureaucrat on an interactive map where you could click a pin, see who makes how much, where they worked, and who they worked for. And I think the bureaucracy went absolutely apoplectic. So they changed the rules on disclosure and they started redacting everything. The swamp fought back, and that's where we stand today. So we simply need a reset of the rules. This never came in front of Congress. This was just an administrative rule in an obscure federal agency called the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. They changed the disclosure rules to us. And furthermore, we can't even quantify the bonuses anymore because they lump them in with pay. They did so many anti-transparent things after we launched our first report all the way back in 2016.
That's wild to me. And I think that, there's so much going on that people tend to forget. And we all pay our taxes. Well, at least some of us, Hunter, maybe not. But we pay our taxes and we expect to know where the money is going. And oftentimes it's really hard to track. That's what you've dedicated your business to and to your foundation to. Open the books. That's what you guys do. But the fact that it's so hard for you guys to get that information and the fact that we don't know where the money is going or who it's going to or where the heck they are, wow, that's more than just a little bit problematic. But, just to circle all back around, Vice President Kamala Harris, she's no better than Joe. In fact, she's likely worse. And that's what y'all are going to have to contend with if, God forbid, she becomes the president of the United States. The swamp, boy, it's going to get swamping again and even worse. So we appreciate you guys at Open the Books. I encourage everybody to follow you, the work that you guys do tirelessly, working to track down and hunt down these numbers for the American people. Adam, I always appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for all you do.
Tommy, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
God bless. All right, folks, that does it for this Friday edition of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. I hope that you guys are following the money, following the chaos, following the news. Boy, we can't even rest anymore because things are changing second by second. But I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. You get to take a little bit of a break. That does it for me. I'll see you right back here Monday, live, 1 p.m. Eastern, with what I'm sure will be more breaking news and more interesting things to discuss. But until then, from Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.